North Penn High School, home of the Knights, and this weekend's game between Lansdale Catholic and North Penn. Welcome to In the Huddle. Along with Drew Markol of the Intelligencer, I'm Kevin Cooney with the Bucks County Courier Times, and as we look at week 2 here of the high school football season, and Drew, the big story out of week 1 obviously was Saturday's upset of Neshaminy, your alma mater, and I guess what do you take out of that? Can Saturn compete, you think, in this division against North Penn?
I think it's a little bit too early to tell. It was a nice win for Satterton, and a nice confidence, maker. But week 1, after what North Penn did to them last year, shutting them out, it's still I don't want to jump that far ahead.
I think the one thing though, in my mind, when you look at Neshaminy's offensive and defensive lines were so touted, had such a huge advantage, and Saturn was able to find a way to get the ball down the field and to stop Neshaminy's offense from really taking big chunks of yardage. I mean, Neshaminy would run off 5-6 yards, but they would not go 20-25 yards like you kind of expected. So I'm thinking that Saturn's speed is going to be something that gives a lot of teams problems coming down as the season goes along.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. That's what North Penn and Dick Beck loves, speed over almost anything. And his defense isn't huge, but they're fast. So maybe they're a little modeled after North Penn, but let's give it a couple weeks.
Speaking of North Penn, they go to Liberty last week and they beat Liberty, and they come home for this game against Lansdale Catholic. And when you look at it, North Penn now has this game against Lansdale Catholic right in the middle of a game against St. Joe Prep next week, Liberty last week. Are you worried about a possible, tweener game?
I don't think so. With the high school kids, everything is big, and when they're playing Lansdale Catholic, they haven't played this game in 7 years, I believe, but these kids want to do well against their neighbors. I don't think that either side will have any problem getting up for it.
What was the one thing about North Penn last week that really impressed you?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint just one thing. The kicking game, Brandon McManus is just phenomenal. Their defense, they stopped a very good quarterback and the Gonzalez kid from Liberty. The secondary, I'd say, might have been the top thing.
And they're renewing this rivalry against LC. LC coming off a big win last week over Downingtown. Who has more to gain and more to lose out of this game, really?
I think North Penn has more to lose. Being a smaller school, and the perception is that LC is, it's a smaller school, and can they beat the Giants? And it's probably a bigger win if LC beats North Penn than if North Penn beats LC, because North Penn probably has some bigger fish to fry.
When you look down the other big game last week, as it turned out, one of the most exciting games was Pembridge and Archbishop Wood going 3 overtimes. Pembridge goes and gets the win. Randy Cuthbert goes for 2 at the end there. I know you like that type of aggressiveness out of a coach. What does that do to that Pembridge program to be able to win a game like that?
They needed a win. After last year's season, there were very few wins last season for the Rams, and sometimes you tell your kids, let's go for the win. If they don't get the win there, you know which way your season goes. But now he's got a bunch of young kids, and he needed to instill a little bit of confidence in them. And one way to do that is to say, let's try and win it here.
And if you look at it, they'll gain a lot of power points probably out of that, because Archbishop Wood is probably going to have a pretty good year within that AAA conference in the Catholic League. I think really that's a good win for Pembridge going forward. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a team they develop into. Everybody kind of thought that they would struggle a lot in this new division. Now you may see them as a 6-win team as things go along. Speaking of struggling, Pennsbury last week, everybody thought they would rip apart Archbishop Ryan. It took really a last-second miracle of Brandon Pepper, a 19-yard run, a little bit of controversy. And I know the Archbishop Ryan coaches were very upset about the way the game ended. Apparently some clock issues at the end. And my question, the one theory I'm floating out there, Drew, is the clock should not be in the hands of home team personnel. Currently, usually it's in the hands of a person who's connected with the program. It's a little bit of an official, but not really an official. Should there be more monitoring, especially in these non-league games, of who's running the clock?
In a perfect world, you'd have that, but you've got guys who've been running these clocks for 30 years, and sometimes they don't see the guy, the referee, waving his arm to start the clock, and is there some home cooking? And have I seen home cooking over the years? Absolutely. But to bring in another person, I don't see the added expense. I don't see that happening. So you just have to kind of live with what you get.
All right, time to look at our games of the week. And Drew, what game are you looking forward to the most this week?
Well, besides one we talked about with North Penn and Lansdale Catholic right here at Crawford Stadium, the Neshaminy-Hatboro game is interesting. You have two teams who thought they were going to win last week. Hatboro loses to Frankfurt, and then Neshaminy loses to Souderton. So now you don't want to go 0-2. 0-2 is a bad thing, confidence-wise, PowerPoint-wise, you name it. So, I don't necessarily want to call it a must-win for both sides, but again, these teams need to prove something.
And if you look at it from the lower portion of the county, the big surprise, actually, if you take from the last part of last season and take it to the first week of this season, has been Council Rock South. Winners of 6 in a row, travels to War Memorial on Friday night. They'll play Central Bucks East. What I want to see is if South keeps this momentum going, how long they can keep this momentum going. Vince Bedison has had the program going for a few years here, have been up and down. If they keep this momentum going, can win at War Memorial, it'll be really interesting to see how well that team can, how far that team could go in that conference. Remember, that third spot behind Pennsbury and Neshaminy has been up for grabs pretty much. Well, thank you for joining us on this edition of In the Huddle. We're going to come back, though, for some of you, and we'll talk to Kyle Berger from WMPV Radio about this North Penn Lansdale Catholic game, probe it a little deeper, and see what happens with the rest of the Bucks Mont football region. Again, for Drew Markol, I'm Kevin Cooney. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you on the other half. Kyle, when you look at it, you saw North Penn last week. You saw Lansdale Catholic. What do you see out of this game?
Well, Kevin, I had an opportunity to call the North Penn Liberty game, and I also went to see Lansdale Catholic play at Wissahickon High School against Downingtown East, and I was impressed a lot by both teams. North Penn just put a whooping on Liberty in the first half. They're up 20-0 at halftime before they just kind of hung on to defeat Liberty by a score of 23-15. As we heard Drew mention earlier, the kicking of Brandon McManus was second to none. 6 for 6 on touchbacks. It's almost unheard of in high school. It's such an advantage to put your opponent at the 20-yard line to start every drive. The other thing I noticed was just the difference-making ability of Ronnie Akins. Lining up at wing back, playing the secondary, lining up at wide receiver. He can score from anywhere on the field, and there aren't many players in this region you can say that about. As far as Lansdale Catholic, their defense was just smothering against Downingtown East, a team that's made the playoffs and gone deep the last couple of years. They knocked the starting quarterback for Downingtown East out of the game with a broken collarbone in the first half, and I think at halftime Downingtown East had 9 yards of total offense. John Howell, who you may remember was a 2,000-plus yard running back from last year, he's made the switch to quarterback this season, and he's kind of a two-way threat quarterback, running more so than passing. And in fact, when we talked to him after the game last Saturday, he graded himself out at a C for running the ball and an F for passing the ball. So obviously there's room for improvement for the Crusaders, but this is going to be one heck of a game on Friday night.
That's Kyle Berger, again, one of the best play-by-play man in the Bucks Mont region. Don't forget to listen to him on 1440 WMPV, our sister station. Really, if you look at, we have the WMPV Intelligencer Scoreboard Show after every one of his games. And make sure you tune in to WMPV1440.com to listen to that. Kyle Berger, I'm Kevin Cooney. Thanks for joining us. Take care.